So, today we are talking about the sinking of the Titanic. So, let's begin with a little bit of historical background about this great tragedy, for it was a tragedy. So, I'm sending you a PowerPoint called A Night to Remember. Please open up that PowerPoint and go to slide 2, and then I'll give you a little bit of historical background. So, on April 10, 1912, the RMS Titanic set sail across the Atlantic Ocean on its maiden voyage from Southampton, England to New York City in America. The men who built her boasted that she was unsinkable, and yet, on the night of April 14, 1912, at 11:40, she struck an iceberg, and 2.5 hours later, she slipped beneath the waves of the ocean to be gone forever. Now, there were 2,200 people who sailed on board her. That included passengers and crew members. But of those 2,200 people, over 1,500 either went down with her or froze to death in the cold waters of the North Atlantic Ocean. Only 705 passengers were rescued and survived this tragic event. Now, to give you a little bit more information about this tragic event in history, I'm going to send you another video. It's entitled Titanic 101, and it's produced by the National Geographic Society. So please watch this video, pause this video, watch the Titanic 101 video, and then when you're finished watching the Titanic 101 video, let's start watching this video again. Okay, now let me give you a little bit more background. Right now I'm going to talk about the author of the book, A Night to Remember, because today's reading assignment comes from that book. And the man who wrote that book was named Walter Lord. Now, Walter Lord wrote A Night to Remember in 1955, which was 43 years after the sinking of the Titanic. Now, this book that he wrote was very well researched. Walter Lord interviewed more than 60 survivors of the Titanic. He also looked at other written records, and he found information from other sources. So this book that this chapter comes from is very well researched. And that means that everything that is presented in this book is true. Now, we do know that people's memories sometimes become unreliable as they age. But with something like this, people tend to remember a traumatic event like this until their dying day. So this chapter has information that is very reliable. Now, Walter Lord wrote 11 books in all. Okay? He wrote A Night to Remember, plus several other books, such as Miracle at Midway, Day of Infamy, which is about the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, A Time to Stand, which is about the Battle of the Alamo, and several other books. And all of his books are really good. I personally have read several of his books, but of all 11 of the books that he read, A Night to Remember is by far his most popular book. And in fact, it was actually turned into a movie called A Night to Remember in 1958. Now, because of the research that he did in writing this book, Walter Lord became an expert on the sinking of the Titanic. And because he was an expert on this historical event, he was often invited and asked to lecture about the sinking of the Titanic. So he was definitely an expert on this sinking. So that's a bit of the background to this historical event and a little bit about the author. So we know that we can rely on the information that we have read for today. It is factually accurate. Okay, let's move on to looking at some vocabulary words. Now, the thing about this chapter that we read for today is that it does contain a lot of words that might be unfamiliar to you. Now, I'm going to give you a lot of vocabulary words, but I'm breaking them up into two different types of groups. The first group are nautical terms. That nautical has to do with the ocean. It has to do with sailing on ships and things like terms relating to the ocean and sailing on ships. So those are nautical terms. I will give those to you first. The second terms will be just more regular, everyday vocabulary words. So let's begin by looking at some nautical terms. So please look in your PowerPoint and go to slide 4. Slide 4. The first nautical term is landlubber. A landlubber is a person who is unfamiliar with the sea or sailing. So if you're sailing on a ship for the first time and you don't really know how to maintain your balance, a sailor might say, you are a landlubber. So that's what the word landlubber means. On slide number 5, we have the word gunnel. Now, it's spelled gun whale, but it's pronounced gunnel. That W is silent. And a gunnel is the upper edge of a side of a boat or a ship. So if you look at this picture on slide number 5, you see an arrow pointing to the gunnel. It is kind of like the edge. It is the edge, the upper edge of a boat or ship. The next word is maiden voyage. I use this term, you heard this term when we talked about the historical background to the sinking of the Titanic. A maiden voyage means the very first voyage of a ship. So the Titanic sank on its maiden voyage. That means it went down on its very first voyage across the Atlantic. And we'll talk more about the significance of that later in today's lesson. The next word is davits. Davits are small cranes on a ship that are used for lowering lifeboats into the water. So if you look at this picture, you see this lifeboat that's hanging by some cables, and these cables are attached to these small cranes that are sticking out over the edge of the boat. Well, those small cranes are davits. So that's what davits are. The next word is promenade. On a ship, the promenade is the deck where people go for walks, and it is usually open to the air. So it's a very pleasant place to be while you're sailing on a ship. So that's what a promenade is. And many people, yes, many people do walk on the promenade during the day and in the evening. The next vocabulary word is the Morse Code. The Morse Code is the series of dots and dashes used to communicate by telegraph. Now, Samuel Morse was the man who invented the telegraph machine in the 1800s. And it is a very simple device. You tap on it, and as you tap on it, it creates dots and dashes. Did it, da 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 da, did it, dot 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 dot. And so the Morse code are the series of dots and dashes that are used to communicate by telegraph. And you can see the Morse code here listed for each letter and all the numbers. So that's what the Morse code is. And the last nautical term are actually three on slide number 10. Starboard, port, and stern. So starboard is the right side of a boat, okay? The right side of a boat. Port means the left side of a boat. And the stern refers to the back of a boat. Now, there is one other term that's not listed here, but that's the bow, B-O-W. The bow is the front of the ship. So these are some nautical terms that are used for telling directions. And, by the way, pilots also use these terms, especially starboard and port. So those are some nautical terms.